This changes everything for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we get huge updates from multiple insiders revealing the truth on Brad Marchand and the Toronto Maple Leafs going into this offseason. But not just that, we get multiple updates on John Tavares and the Toronto Maple Leafs revealing exactly what his next contract might look like. We're going to break down all this, Brad Marchand's next contract, linking him to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and so much more later on this episode. Before we get into that, if you're part of the 88% watching this and you haven't hit that sub button yet, it's completely free, and we'll give you updates all off season going into next season on the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Florida Panthers, any team you want to hear from, we are covering right here. So look no further. This is the perfect home for NHL content. But with that, Darius, we got up straight into the first topic today, and we'll get straight into the John Tavares stuff. We've seen from Pierre LeBrun, it's a stretch to think the Leafs will get John Tavares at an AAV under $5 million. Now, I know we got a lot of reports saying they're looking at a longer contract, almost like Chris Tanev, but it does seem like John Tavares' contract could come at the $5+ million range. What is your initial thoughts on this, and how far would the Leafs really go on this contract?
Well, I think it's going to get really interesting with some deferred money, and I think the Leafs have some stuff that they can offer. We talk a lot about low tax or no tax states, and that players want to go there. The Leafs do have a lot of stuff in terms of, endorsements that they can offer players. So there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff in terms of what the contract might look like. But listen, I think Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs have interest in bringing John Tavares back. They talked a lot in the season-ending press conference about changing the DNA, but I don't know if you have to go that far to change the DNA in terms of John Tavares, because there's a couple factors you have to think about. If John Tavares doesn't return, who is going to play center besides Austin Matthews for this Toronto Maple Leafs team? You're going to have to go out in free agency and find a guy who's better, and I'm not sure you can do that right now. John Tavares, great face-off guy. He's much more physical than people give him credit for, especially in the playoffs. He always finishes his checks. And he scored almost 40 goals this year as he's he's in his mid 30s, right? Like, he's getting up there in age. And I don't know if he's going to slow down that much. Like, I don't know if he's going to be a 10 or 15 goal scorer out of nowhere all of a sudden next year, right? Like, he's going to keep this up at least for a couple of years. Now, things can get very interesting, as you showed the report saying, it's probably not going to be under $5 million. And a lot of people are thinking he's going to take league minimum for some reason. That's not going to happen. On the open market, he could get easily $9 million, I think, out there, because Stamkos got $8 million. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think he wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. He wants to be here. He wants to win a Stanley Cup here. And I think just like the first time when he signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he will take a bit of a pay cut to be here, to stay here. But I think the Leafs have a couple decisions to make. Can they upgrade without him? If the answer is no, you definitely should bring him back because he still has great use. Obviously, you got to fill out the rest of the team still, and you have a lot of salary cap space to do that. But he is going to sign for less than what he was making. I'm thinking it's going to be 5 or 6 million, and it's going to be a lot longer of a contract than people realize. And then he either goes on Robot Island, or there's some weird deferred money type stuff that we saw with some contracts, of course, signed last year as well. So it's going to get interesting. But I think if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm sure you've already evaluated if you want to bring him back or not in terms of changing the DNA. And I think, the answer is going to be he will return to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but what does the contract look like?
And the big thing is looking at Scotiabank, they have him projected at just over $6 million on a 2-year deal. You can see some of the contract comparisons. One of them's actually a free agent this year as well in Claude Giroux. The big thing is this center market going into free agency is not the deepest. Claude Giroux is one of the top guys, still an older guy, and we know John Tavares has outperformed him and has been doing it for quite some time. So going out to fill out this roster, if you have to go dumpster diving, I shouldn't say that, but bargain bin hunting on a center to fill out this team, you're going to overpay for someone that's not giving the production. Like you said, we've seen John Tavares go out. We've seen him, how good he's been this year. 38 goals, 36 assists for 74 points at 34 years old. Tavares still has a lot to give. You're getting a 30-plus goal scorer for a cheaper contract than he would get anywhere else if he left. So the big thing is, there is looking at the team. Yes, they need to fill out a lot. Mitch Marner seems like he's gone. Matthew Knies is rumored to sign a 8x8 or an 8x7. Whatever this might be, if you bring John Tavares back, are you comfortable running him as the second line center? Or do you think the Leafs might get aggressive and try to find that second line center in free agency, or maybe even via trade?
I think they have to at least start looking. If you don't go into next season without it, it might not be an issue because I still think, John Tavares is good at center. We were already talking years ago about him moving to the wing, and he still got the job done last year. Obviously, the Leafs as a team didn't, achieve their goal, which is winning the Stanley Cup, but he still has great use at that position, at least for a year. But you have to start looking via trade, maybe thinking about free agency next year. But you still have to fill out the rest of the team, whether it's the wings and the third line center position, because I feel like that's still kind of a wild card with nobody there right now, or it's Max Domi or Pontus Holmberg, who is an RFA as well. And I'm not sure if he's returning either. So I think they're completely rethinking the team. They have the opportunity to do that this offseason. Obviously, there's a bunch of free agents as well from the Toronto Maple Leafs and RFAs, a bunch of decisions still to be made. So it's going to be interesting. But I think at the end of the day, you probably should bring John Tavares back on a contract that is $5 or $6 million and spanning a little bit longer than people think, maybe like 4 or 5 years. And yes, that'll take him to almost 40 or 40 years old. But you can get the AAV down, and that would make sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs moving forward. So it's going to be interesting. I think ultimately he stays a Toronto Maple Leaf. He wants to be here. He wants to win here. I think you want guys like that on the team, honestly. And I don't think you can upgrade right now. I don't know if you can get anybody better than what John Tavares brought to the team last year.
And I mean, Leafs fans, what's your thoughts on this? There's a lot of guys they need to sign. There's a lot of players that fans do not want back. But what is your thoughts on John Tavares? What would be the absolute max you would give him? Would you give him a 5x5? Would you give him a 6x5, a 6x4? Whatever it is, go ahead and leave a comment down below. But let's hop straight into the second topic, which I'm sure everyone is wondering about, and that is Brad Marchand. From Pierre LeBrun, we've seen the Toronto Maple Leafs are expected to be one of the potential landing spots for Brad Marchand. He even mentioned during the second round series against Toronto, he grew up as a fan. And I mean, Darius, listen, we know Brad Marchand has a lot to give. He still has a lot in the tank. We're seeing him dominate right now in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I mean, let's roll this again. You can see him ripping past Evan Bouchard. Keep in mind, Bouchard's in his mid-20s. Marchand's almost 40. This is a guy that wants to make it. But when you see the more reports of the bidding could start north of $8 million on a 4-year deal, what is your thoughts on this? And should the Leafs stay away if that's an 8x4 contract?
I mean, yeah, that is a tough contract to stomach for Brad Marchand at this point of his career. But when you talk about changing the DNA, and that's what Brad Treliving was talking about, this is a guy that would do that. I think the Leafs should try as best as they can without getting into too much of a bidding war to acquire this player in free agency. I feel like he might be open to signing here too. There was another report that his camp is also looking for a deal where he can get a lot of endorsements. And you can't tell me if he became a Toronto Maple Leaf, he wouldn't be in every single commercial in the greater Toronto area. So, Brad Marchand becoming a Toronto Maple Leaf is just something that makes sense at this point. I feel like a lot of fans hate him for what he's done to the Maple Leafs for the last, decade or over a decade at this point. But he's the type of player that you love on your team, you hate to play against. I would absolutely love him on the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like Leafs fans should be open to this idea. Again, the contract has to make some sense. I feel like you are going to overpay for him in theory anyway, but if it gets a bit too ridiculous, like if we're looking at $8-9 million, maybe you do steer away. But this is the type of thing that Brad Treliving was talking about with changing the DNA. This is a guy who has done the job. He has won the Stanley Cup. He knows what it takes to win. He is arguably, because I know Sam Bennett's putting up some great numbers and some great games, the Florida Panthers' best player and probably the runner-up for the Conn Smythe this year, which is absolutely insane to be thinking about if you look back at how this season started. So it is, I think, a good idea, somebody that they should add. But again, what does the contract look like? But if he is open to endorsements, and that's part of the deal as well, and that'll bring the AV down, Toronto is a great opportunity for that, right? So it's going to get very interesting this offseason. But again, Brad Marchand is a Toronto Maple Leaf. Just makes sense, but doesn't make sense in terms of the dollars and cents.
And I mean, I could think of the endorsements now. Him lifting the Stanley Cup with Tavares, this would be money pouring into his doors. But the big thing is, listen, the playoff performances. We've seen Marchand. He killed the Leafs year after year. We've seen it, the game sevens, whatever it was. But even at his age of, 37, 38, whatever Marchand is now, he is still producing 4 goals in the first 3 games of the Stanley Cup Finals, leading the Florida Panthers 2 wins in this. The big thing is, listen, Leafs fans, it's going to cost a lot. It might cost more than you want to bring a Marchand. $8 million is a bit ridiculous, but if you can get him on another deferred contract, like we're seeing a lot of teams do, this could make total sense. But what's your guys' thoughts on all this? What is your thoughts on the reports coming out on John Tavares? What a cap would you be fine giving him? And what's your thoughts on the contract talks coming from Brad Marchand? We're seeing the Leafs linked to him. We're seeing the expected money of north of $8 million. How much would you give Brad Marchand? Go ahead and leave a comment on all of this below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back with another episode, so keep your eye out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.